Can you discuss the rationales that were given for the differences between the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate?
There are a couple stark differences, one of which is the House, which is elected on the basis of 2-year terms, was expected to be closer to the people. As the framers expected, those elected to the House would have their pulse on the will of the people. They would react with greater passion. They would react more directly, more immediately, and thus it was not granted, for example, the long-term role of making treaties. The Senate, elected to 6-year terms, was expected to take the long term, to exercise broader vision for the greater good of the nation. And so it was hoped that the Senate could be free of those immediate passions and perhaps prejudices that would govern the House of Representatives.
Looking at the executive functions and the legislative functions in England and in the United States, what are the differences between the executive and legislative functions in the British parliamentary system and in our system?
In the parliamentary system, of course, the executive and legislative functions are largely fused. Students understand that the House of Commons selects the Prime Minister from their own ranks, and of course cabinet members are similarly selected from the House of Commons. And it's expected that the Prime Minister will drive the legislative agenda. The Prime Minister can expect that upon consultation and checking the political winds at opportune times, will understand that his or her legislative agenda will be embraced and will pass. Of course, it's very possible that if a Prime Minister gets too far out in front of the Commons, or some disasters occur with respect to the policies or the programs that had been advanced by the Prime Minister, that the Prime Minister can in fact be subjected to a vote of no confidence. Hence, the House of Commons has a wonderful way of holding that chief executive accountable to it. That differs, of course, in our system. The framers of the Constitution had shunned the parliamentary system because they had decided to embrace separation of powers. And one clear way to see the stark difference is through Article 1, Section 6, which prohibits any person serving in the legislature from serving in an executive office. Right at that point, then, the framers were clearly closing the door on the prospect of a parliamentary system. And so the House of Representatives and Congress as a whole is left to interact with our president. Often there is great tension, many differences in terms of policies and programs and laws, and tension and gridlock and deadlock can arise and frequently does bedevil the nation. Of course, students know that ultimately Congress has the authority to wield over the president as a means of making the president accountable through the great power of impeachment. It's been rarely used in our history, but that's the ultimate way to bring an errant president to heel.
Do you think one system is more efficient than the other? And if so, why?
I think that the parliamentary system is more efficient because of the fusion of the executive and legislative powers, which allows the Prime Minister to drive the agenda. Things can happen much more quickly in Great Britain because of the parliamentary system than they can through our system of separation of powers, of checks and balances, and of course, because so often in our history, the president is a member of his or her party, someday her party, that may not, in fact, control Congress. And so you've got party tensions, different issues that arise that reflect partisan concerns and causes. And there are many, many reasons that can contribute to a less efficient, much slower process here in America than in England.
Do you think that the British parliamentary system is more responsive to the will of the people?
I think that often it can be said that the House of Commons is more responsive, but you'll get a good argument from many people here in America who will say that the fact that in America we elect our members to the House every 2 years provides a greater opportunity for the American people to hold their representatives accountable and responsive. In the House of Commons, of course, the members are elected at least on the basis of every 5 years. That's a much longer term than our members in Congress in the House serve. And of course, while the Prime Minister can call for special elections, particularly when it serves the interest of the Prime Minister, maybe sensing that there's a greater chance to build the majority of the party, the Prime Minister can call an election sooner. So you get a good argument from the Brits or from the Americans on which government is actually more responsive to the people.
You mentioned the 5-year term of members of the Commons. Our House members serve for 2, our senators serve for 6. Are there specific ways that you think the difference in terms affects what they do and how they do it?
I think so. First of all, when we look at the very nature of the House of Representatives, we understand that the members are going to be very responsive to their constituents, to the voters back home, in terms of raising issues that capture the passions or the prejudice of the people. And that may not serve the long-term interest of the country, but it can certainly serve the more immediate interest of those in the House who might aspire to leadership or who want to drive their partisan cause. And of course, the difference between the House and the Senate in that regard, at least it's hoped, is that the senators can take a longer-term view, be less controlled by those immediate passions.